for e-commerce design. As always, I'm Charles William Bill Marshall, and that's my email address and cell phone. We're doing this for CIT253, which is a 3-credit-hour course titled Data-Driven Web Pages. Okay, you've seen this before. These are the, upon successful completion, the student can. And the first one that bears on what we're going to talk about today is design a functional e-commerce supporting database. And the second one is design and develop integrated web database applications such as inventory, billing, and shipping. Now, I quite frankly think those are both aspirational goals, because depending on the complexity of your e-commerce site that you're setting, you'll not complete this design in a lifetime. I mean, the world continues to spin, and if you're smart and designed a fully integrated, flexible design, you will continually adjust to the meeting needs of the world. If you define an e-commerce site that's simple enough to accomplish in this 3-hour course, it's going to approach trivial. So what I plan to do is talk to you through the thought process one needs to consider as you design a focused part of a total e-commerce site. In e-commerce intro, we talked about we're going to need to deal with users, product, and orders. And I would submit that users we can think of as customers, because it's important to think of the perspective of where you're, if you're centrally faced and looking outward, customers are going to be the people who are going to want to buy things and send you money, or hopefully you can convince them that they want to buy things and or agree to send you money. Users are going to be the people inside that are actually using your system. So from now on, I'm going to be talking about customers, just because I think that's a better way to keep your head screwed on about who this person actually is. So I'm going to have an entity called customer, and these aren't cast in stone, but they're going to have a customer number that's serial or auto-generated. First name, last name will be the main contact that you have at that. Now, I think in fairly short order you're going to find out that customers have more than one name, so that 2 or 3 people buy. But if we think that this is only going to be a website, then it's when they log on, what's their first name, last name, middle initial, what's their address that they're going to bill to, what's the postal code. And note I'm saying postal, not zip, because we're going to hopefully have people outside the United States of America, so that when we deal with Canada, they won't say, well, I don't have a zip code. We're going to talk about salesperson down the road, but you may or may not need this, but in many cases there's somebody who's getting a commission based on selling to this person. It may be that they support that geography, and as you learn the business rules, you'll learn that, well, you don't even have salespeople, or you do in fact have salespeople. And so it's a integer to get to the salesperson ID. And it turns out that when I was using Toad, I could have deleted this one, because this is the link that's going to take us back to the salesperson table. Now, is that all you need on the customer, or is that more than you need? Probably, but the whole point of this is this assignment or this challenge is kind of like the professor that writes why on the blackboard. And the only acceptable answer is because doing an e-commerce where you don't know the business rules, the business plan, and so forth is damn near impossible. Are we dealing with a website that only sells CBD oil and only has 4 different kinds of bottles and everything's on one shelf in the guy's office? Or are we dealing with a website approaching an Amazon where all sorts of things happen? as you know the business that you're dealing with and the rules that it follows, you can address that. And we'll talk about how you get there as we go through this. Okay, I chose to have multiple ship tos, and because I think there's a possibility that multiple people are going to ship to the same place, this design assumes that everybody uses the same ship tos table, and we're going to have a ship to ID, the name of the company at that ship to, a person if there is a person there, the street address that we ship it to, their postal code. If there's a note, it's a varchar, and the phone number that we would call if we're shipping by air and we have to give a telephone to contact. So that's a shipping contact phone number. Next we're going to talk about product, and so product leads us to stock keeping units, and you're going to hear as you go through industry SKUs. How many SKUs do you have, and so forth. That stands for stock keeping units, and it's how you track product through the world. So you're going to need a purchase order to purchase products from a vendor. Product SKUs define what you call each stock keeping unit or SKU, what each SKU costs, how you group your product SKU for storage and for reporting, and what size and weight is each SKU, because as you start to warehouse it, you're going to need to know how heavy it is, and when you ship it, you're going to need to know how big it is and what size it is. So our product stored in SKUs looks like this. We've got an item code, which is some 40 character, it's what you call it, a description 1, a description 2, so that you know more about what it is, what it weighs, what its volume, and without doubt you've got to decide what unit of measure you're going to use and be consistent. Is it going to be grams, is it going to be pounds, tons, doesn't matter, but going forward you're going to have to pick one unit of measure for weight, or add a field that says unit of measure. Volume, again, you're going to have to decide what are you talking about, cubic inches, cubic centimeters, how do you measure volume? Or do you need a unit of another field that tells you what this volume you're measuring this in is? The more complex the world you're dealing in, the more chance it is that you're going to have a unit of measure for volume and a unit of measure for weight. Invoice accounting number, when you or inventory accounting number, when it's in inventory, what GL account are you going to track it under? What cost of goods, that should be COG, cost of good accounting number for when you bring things in. Sales accounting, when you sell it, what account is it going to go under? And that's important because sometimes you buy bolts and you buy wood and you assemble them and send them out as under some other sales account. So here's where we were talking about the selling unit, the stocking unit, and the purchasing unit. You're going to stock it in some unit of measure, which was, is it by the case? Is it by the pack? Is it you buy it by the yard and sell it by the pound? And then you've got factors to get between what unit of measure you buy it in and what unit of measures you sell it in. And finally, the market price, which is what is the current market price for that unit. Some people call it list price, some people call it adjusted retail price, but a market price. All right, and so we're going to purchase from vendors, so we better track vendors. So what are we going to track about the vendors? Well, they're going to have a vendor number or vendor ID. What's their company name? What's the sales contact that we call when we want to help. They're going to sell us stuff. Who do we call when we want to place orders and so forth? Who do we call when we want to talk about their accounts receivable, what we owe them and when we're going to pay and so forth? What's the address that we send our payments to? What postal code, notes on that vendor, and then the phone number for this sales contact when we want to place an order or ask a question. Vendors' offers. We're going to buy many products. Many times we'll have multiple people we can buy it from. So for every vendor ID and item code that we have a price, what is the price? What's the beginning date of their offer? And when is the end of that offer? And a flag that say who's our primary vendor. And I'm not sure why it says binary 20. It's binary 2 positions. Yes, no. So that if we want to find out who we buy something for, we can look up the item code and a yes under prime vendor and find them. Product is stored in a warehouse. Okay, so we're going to need to know the different warehouses we store it in. Maybe we've only got one warehouse and life is simple, but if we want to support going forward and growing, I would suggest that this makes sense to start out with the concept that you'll have multiple warehouses. So what's the name of the warehouse? Who in the warehouse is in charge of receiving? Who's in charge of shipping? What's the street address of the warehouse? These are our warehouses now. The postal code, notes about the warehouse, and phone numbers to get a hold of the receiving person and the shipping person. Home location in a warehouse. So if you have a warehouse and an SKU or an item code in the warehouse, where's the default location? And that's all I'm really going to track initially, because I also have something called an inventory lot number, an ILN. And so it's whenever we receive something, we're going to receive it, create an ILN. It's going to be in a warehouse, and it's going to be for an item code, and we're going to know how many we currently have rack on hand, ROH, and what's the current cost. So if we receive 10 at $10 a piece, we would have 10 here and 100 there. We do it that way so that if we have a cycle count and we find out that, well, we don't have 10, we actually have 9, we've still got a cost of $100 in it, so it's going to be 9 divided by 100 to figure out what our cost is. And I keep location and advocate keeping inventory based on an XYZ location, which is a Cartesian coordinate system. So there's some origin in the warehouse, and then we keep track of how far in the X direction, the Y direction, and the Z direction is it to get there. And then a location text, so that if there is some description like Frank's desk or whatever, it's there. This is using the power of modern day computers. Instead of saying, well, we've got 100 in the warehouse and we don't know where they are other than their home location, this will allow us to have things either at home, or if we overfill the home location for some reason, we can keep track of 30. And if somebody decides that they're going to take 3 up to the front in the sales room, they ought to do a transfer, which we're not going to go through all that description, but there ought to be a process so they can transfer from one island to another and keep track of where that is. And so when you want to know your inventory location, you're going to find on the item code, and then look at all locations, all ILNs that have a rack on hand greater than 0 or non-zero. Okay, so we know how to track the product. How do we get it? Well, we purchase it based on a purchase order. This is a paper one, but it lends to the point as you go forward in database, and I'm sure you already picked this up in your prior ones, but you ought to get in the habit of thinking one-to-many, because this needs to be laid out with a purchase order header and a purchase order detail. And so the things that are the same for every line are up in the header, and the things that are different for this line versus that line are down in the detail. So that means we're going to have a PO header table, and it's the order number, the vendor it's going to, the warehouse we're buying it for, and right there we've made a decision. It is, if we do it this way, we've made the decision that every purchase order is going to be to one and only one warehouse. And in a simple world that may work. But if you get to be a nationwide company, and let's say you've got 5 warehouses, and you've got a vendor who is national scope, and you want to go place an order and you want to have 20% of it to go to each place, is it okay with them to have it laid out like this? If not, then you're going to need to move warehouse ID down to the detail line so that each detail line can go to a different place. And then you have the date you issued the PO and the date you wanted it to arrive, and the promise that they actually promised that it would arrive, and then when did it actually arrive, because you're going to want to be able to evaluate your vendors to see if they ship on time and deliver on time. And what's the total value of all the goods that are on order on this, and the PO status. And I would advocate that you consider having status levels so that you have things like new, which means you haven't placed it yet, POG, which means you've given it but it's still open, received means it's all here, PAY means that you've paid for it, and PST means that it's posted and closed, no longer open. And then you might decide that you're not going to have a PAY status. It just, when you post it, it means that you've paid and you've posted that payment to the order. And so if you have a PO status at this level, it's going to have to be a cumulative logic of what's in the detail. So on each line of the PO detail, you're going to have the order number, so you can tie back to your header, the line number, like on the paper, line 1, line 2, line 3, the item code of what's on order on this line, the quantity you ordered, the quantity you received, the expected quantity is what you've expected but it hadn't gotten here yet, the purchase price is what are you paying per unit for this on this line. The purchase value is what's the total value of this line, so that would be your order quantity times your price. The tax value is how much is there going to be taxed on this line, do you expect? And line stage again is new, POG, REC, PST, and those can change, but the point is you need to be aware that purchase orders live and die, and as you have a way to track as they go through the life, because the world is not simple. You don't issue a PO and it immediately arrive and you immediately pay. Alright, so sales orders was the last thing that we said we needed to deal with. And now here's what a paper sales order might look like, and we've got who the customer is, we've got how they're going to pay up here, and then when we get to the point where we're done with all the stuff that applies to the whole order, we go down into the detail and we have quantities and product and so forth. Now, they don't count line 2, line 3, and line 4, but in the computer we do. So we sell to customers, so our customer file that we've talked about earlier is going to come into play. And do we pay commission? A lot of companies do need to pay commission based on either who physically took the order on the phone, or if it was a website, maybe you're paying commissions based on geography because you've got folks who go out and do trouble calls and so forth, and maybe you don't have to pay commission. But if you do need to pay commission based on sales, this is where you need to have a file that's keeping up with the salesperson and where you're going to send the money. All right, so if we look at the order header, we're going to know things like the order number, which is just a machine generated, where you're going to ship it to, where you're going to ship it from. Again, this assumes that everything ships out of the same warehouse. And maybe it will and maybe it won't. But you need to make a decision at the design stage whether that's the case or not. Or if you need to bill it from one warehouse and maybe you're going to ship it from 30. Who's the customer that's buying it? Who's the salesperson that's getting the credit? What date was it open, and date and time, and what date? So that could be when you quoted it, or maybe you don't do quotes. When was the PO received? When did they want it shipped? When did we promise we would ship it? When did we ship the last part of it? What was the product total value? What order type was it? By type, I mean, is it a new order? Is it a reference order? Is it posted? And then the status. And type is maybe you've got orders that you're never going to ship, but they're a reference that you go out and somebody can reference to quickly fill in an order, so it's just like another order. And status is going to be much like POs in that you're going to have new orders. You're going to have things that are at the QUO stage. You've quoted them, and you've sent a quote, but the person hasn't ordered them. You're going to have them at the ORD stage, which is you've got the purchase order now, and you've committed product to it. You're going to have a PIC stage, which means you've picked the parts on this line. An INV stage, which means or a SHP, which means that you've shipped this line. INV means that you've invoiced the line, and then PST means you've posted the line. So, as I said in the early part, when you're getting ready to design an e-commerce system, you need to figure out, once you grow the thing out, what level of sophistication are you going to need, and design it so that it's appropriate for today and it doesn't kill you with overhead, but that when somebody comes in and says, well, we need to, and they will be very creative, you have a structure that you can build upon that lets you do that. All right, so if that was a header, here's our detail. The order number, the item line number, order quantity, back order quantity, committed quantity. So if somebody orders 10 and you got 5 on back order, you're going to say order 10, back order 5, committed 5. And then when the 5 come in, you're going to change, commit them in inventory and move from 5 on back order to a total of 10 committed. But you may ship some first. Once you ship them, the committed, if you ship 5, you got committed zeros and back ordered 5. So the point is, you need a way to keep up with the fact that when you get an order, it doesn't immediately pop out the back door. And how do you track through the stages, and are you going to handle back orders, and so forth? What's the sales unit price that we sold this line for? And it may very well not be what you claim your price is back on the SKU record, because people make discounts and they make deals, but you'll need to know what you sold it, what value, what its price was, Sales value is the extension of the quantity times the price. What was the value of the tax on this line? Some lines are not going to be taxable and some are because of, you don't have to pay tax on air freight in or assembly or whatever the state's tax rules are. And then high stage and low stage. So we're getting ready to find out that there's more than just the order detail. There's in fact another one-to-many down, so that for every order line you have the shipments that come out of it. So we've got a compound key now of order number, line number, and shipment number. Shipment number is going to start with 1 on each line, so of each order line, and have as many shipments as it took to get that order line completed. So what were the order quantity when that line was shipped or created? What was on back order? What was committed? The sales unit price, and so forth, so that if you make 5 different releases, you can track them and see what happened. Okay, we talked to the ship to address, and the order is going to refer to that, and so we've got something that looks like that. So we've talked about a lot of tables, and what I'm going to try to do now is talk to you about how they would relate. So we have a customer who has the ability to know who a default customer salesperson is. We have the order header, which is tied back to a customer number and who the actual salesperson is, because maybe most of the time Joe sells this customer, but today Kay sold it, and so we have the ability to override that. The order is going to go to a ship to, a one-to-many to ship to, so that a ship to may be on many orders, but any order is only going to ship one place, which is a design constraint that we've built into the system. And you have to decide whether, yep, that's right, or no, we need to be able to ship differently than that. And so we had the order head, then we had the order detail, and then we have order in line ship, the order line shipment, so that we can take multiple shipments to ship one line. We had the product that we've talked about, and it's related to the order detail, and based on knowing the order detail, what product you're shipping down here on the order line shipment. And we had a warehouse that we were going to ship from. The other side that we had was the resupply table. So we know we have a vendor, and we have an item catalog that keeps up with all these products. What does this vendor say they're going to charge for this product? We had a PO head. We had a PO detail. And depending on how you want to track it, I had a way through inventory I could tell how many times we received, but you need to think through how sophisticated do you want to be able to know that you ordered 10 gallons of paint and they shipped 3 the first shipment and 5 the second time, and then 2 more later, or does the system not care? I would advocate that you ought to want the system to care, because it all seems pretty simple at the start, but it gets pretty complex pretty quick. And so having a way to track the audit trail really helps in finding out why the system doesn't agree with what everybody thinks we ought to have 10 out there, but the system says you've got 11. How did you get the 1? All right, so I'm not sure that helped or not. The point I'm trying to make is that in all of these, you really need to be looking for one-to-many relationships and trying to look at the business rules and the needs you have and decide how you're going to organize your data to have the flexibility that you need. Organizing for more flexibility than you need can be done so that it has low impact, or it can be a terribly high impact and make the system unusable. Which leads us back to my contention that the two requirements that they have are aspirational, because unless you know the full business model of the business, you won't be able to design a system for it. And if you think you know the needs of the system today, in 6 months they're going to be different. So that really the important part is to design a flexible relational database that meets your company's needs and can continue to evolve into the future. So that was week 4 e-commerce design discussion. If you have questions, please contact me at cmarshall at 0050@kctcs.edu. Thank you.